Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you, Armani from Admissions, for also being here. It's great to see so many of you. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about what is special about SMS and what is special about our program within that, and then go over some nuts and bolts about admissions and more about the program. And then hopefully I won't talk for more than 10 minutes or 15 minutes at the most, and then we can answer your questions. As Andrea said, this is being recorded, but you could change your screen name if you don't want people to know who you are and turn off your camera. So hopefully there's no question that is too uncomfortable feeling to get it answered in this space. So SMS we are like the OG social science and public health program. More than 50 years ago, the department was founded to do research at the intersection of social and behavioral science and public health. And our doctoral programs have been with the department since those days and are really special in the depth of their disciplinary engagement. So when students apply, they don't apply just to SMS in general to the PhD program, they apply to one of the disciplines. Currently, we're reviewing applications for anthropology, sociology, and history. Many schools of public health, I think all schools of public health have some kind of department that is a social and behavioral science-ish department. But what distinguishes SMS is the depth of our disciplinary engagement. We're looking for students who are really interested in the discipline to which they're applying, not just in doing some archival work in relation to a public health problem, but in fact in engaging with how historians have thought about that problem, or not just interested in doing a little bit of qualitative research on why people do whatever behavior it is we want them to do, but actually taking a deep dive into what anthropological or sociological theory has to say about what are the many reasons why people don't do things that we wish that they would do. So we're looking for people who are in conversation with that discipline. Doesn't mean, I mean, obviously you don't already have a PhD in sociology or you wouldn't be looking at us. But in your applications, we want you to be able to tell us about how you see what you would get out of that discipline and what you would give to it. How you will advance knowledge in history or sociology or anthropology. And that doesn't mean that you need to name check or cite every single anthropologist / historian / sociologist that you've ever read, but it does mean that we want you to situate yourself in relation to that discipline in the same way that faculty in the department have traditionally, the faculty who have disciplinary training have been in conversation with those disciplines. For students who matriculate, some students come in with a master's, some students come in without a master's. If you come in without a master's, students do 60 credits of coursework. So half of that is in the School of Public Health, and half of that is in the discipline of choice. So that's when you really see, like, do you really want to spend 30 credits of coursework with a bunch of sociology students? That's sort of where the rubber hits the road in terms of thinking about who you want to be, what you want to read, and what kind of professional identity you want to craft in graduate school. So 60 credits of coursework, which works out to 3 years for students without a master's.
6 donuts by himself?
I'm sorry, can you mute if you're not me? Thank you.
6 Dunkin' Donuts.
And 2 years of coursework for students who come in with a master's. Some students come in with a disciplinary master's or a sort of, or like a general social science master's. Some students come in with a master's in public health. So whatever kind of master's you have, if it's relevant, you'll get advanced standing for those courses. Once you join us, 2 years of coursework, and some milestones along the way. We have a milestone that assesses competency in research methods. We have a milestone that assesses competency in your capacity to synthesize and critique theory. Then you propose your dissertation research. Then you do your dissertation research. Then we celebrate you. That's it, like as if it were so simple. In terms of application review, what I can tell you, as I said in the beginning, when you apply to a specific discipline. And there are a lot of students who have a genuine and deeply felt interest in social and behavioral sciences in general, as they intersect with public health. And there are maybe other programs that are a better fit for that, because there are other programs that don't, either you could say force you or give you the opportunity to have that kind of deep dive into a discipline. And so if you're not sure if you want to do anthropology or sociology, you could do a crash course between now and December 1st, but it may be that one of the other outstanding social and behavioral science programs would be a better fit for your general interest in that area. So students apply to a particular discipline. They're reviewed by faculty in that discipline in the department, and then in our partner departments downtown. And then the admissions committee, which is pretty much the doctoral committee, the admissions committee as a group considers applications, and then we make a few offers. And the reason that we do this open house is that we've found over the years that some students come from backgrounds where they feel very comfortable reaching out to faculty and persisting in communicating with faculty until they get to know them. And we feel like that creates sort of an unfair playing field, because not everybody knows that that's even a thing that you could do. And also, we're very flattered by the vast level of interest in our program, and faculty don't really have the capacity to speak with every prospective student. So the point at which you would be in conversation with a faculty member would be if you're on the short list. And at that point, we frequently schedule interviews, although not always. So that's the sort of don't call us, we'll call you, which we say with a lot of love and respect. We know that it's a huge, huge commitment to apply to doctoral programs, and that from where you're sitting, it might feel like it is vital to speak with faculty. And I think one question that students frequently have that I can assure you about is they want to know if faculty are taking doctoral students in the coming year. And because our program is so small and our students are so great, all faculty who work with doctoral students are always taking doctoral students. I sometimes describe doctoral students as like the dessert of our jobs. So everybody loves working with doctoral students, and you do not need to worry about that. Trying to think about what else I might tell you. Andrea, do you want to prompt me with, I'm sure there are things that I've left out that
the big question people want to know about is funding.
Right. Thank you.
Fellowships, yes.
Tell me about funding. So we wish that we could fund all of the terrific students who apply. Every year we turn away like truly extraordinary applicants who feel like they are going to be the future of public health because we don't have enough funded slots. The way our program is currently funded is that we have training grants from NIH, which are a funding mechanism where NIH gives money to an institution to train students in a particular area. And so we have 3 institutional training grants from which we have slots. One is the training program that I direct, and we're very proud to have the nation's only predoctoral level training program in gender, sexuality, and health. So we're looking for applicants who are interested either in sexual and reproductive health, or more broadly in gender and sexuality in relation to a range of health outcomes. We have a current student who's working on the history of neonatal intensive care units. We have another student who's working on abortion politics in Ohio. And those is obviously those are my babies, so I know their work the best. We have 2 other T32 programs. One is on HIV, substance use, and incarceration. And you might think wow, that is really a very specific Venn diagram. And so I want to assure you that if you check off 2 of those 3 things, you would be reasonable to consider for that. So just because you haven't worked in all 3 of them, don't cut yourself off from that. So we have gender, sexuality, and health, HIV, substance use and incarceration, and then social determinants of HIV. Unfortunately, and this is NIH's rule, not my rule, those programs are only, you need to be a citizen or a permanent resident to qualify for those programs. So we really hate that that is the case. The only exception to that international funding opportunity rule is history, which has its own separate funding, which is not from NIH. Because it's its own separate funding, which is not from NIH, they can just support the student who is the best student who's interested in history and public health. And so they have been our one little area of support for international students. And I'm not going to tell you, if you're an international student, absolutely don't apply, because, and it's not like I can scrape up the money in the couch cushions to fund you, but like, it's not impossible that between now and February 1st, some extremely wealthy person would give mailmen a lot of money that would enable us to support doctoral students, but it is very unlikely. And if it were my money that I was putting down for an application, I'm not sure that I would do it. So, you know, just trying to talk straight, because I know it's an expensive process. We guarantee all of our students 5 years of funding. That doesn't mean that we actually hope to give you 5 years of funding, because we provide our students with a lot of mentorship and encouragement to submit applications for external funding. And our students have a absolutely terrific track record with getting that funding. And so securing a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship enables them to rotate off one of our funding programs, which then opens up another slot for a new student, which is why I don't actually know how many slots we're going to have in gender, sexuality, and health this year. I know that we'll have 1, and it's possible that we would have 2, because it's possible that one of our current students would secure external funding and would end up rotating onto it. And then that would be amazing. So that is the funding story. A few thoughts on your essay before opening up for questions. Some of you may have read like all of the online guides and how to apply to grad school, and some of you may have not. But one thing that's important to remember is that we also have your resume, and you also have to labor through typing in everything you've ever done into the application portal. And so please do not use the space in your essay to tell us the things that you have done. We really want to know, we want to get to know you as a thinker. When you apply to college, the essay expresses what kind of person you are. And when you apply to grad school, the essay expresses what kind of scholar you might be. And so that means it's not a great space for a recap of like when you cradled someone lovingly in your arms as they died. Like that is a really sad story. And you know, it's part of being a human being is that people you love die or people you love get sick. And you can skip that and go right to the questions that you're interested in, not to be a robot, but I think like we really want to hear what are the questions that you want to answer. And in no case do we ever hold a student to actually working on those actual questions. Like one of my students wrote her application essay that she wanted to work on teen pregnancy. And then in her first year on the program, she wanted to work on lymphatic filariasis. And she ended up doing her research on drug treatment programs in Puerto Rico. So interests evolve. And we think that if your interests don't evolve, it's because we haven't been doing a good enough job at opening up your mind to new questions. And that leads me just to one other thing that I'll mention before open it up to your questions, which is our mentorship model. Unlike many programs where you enter with a firm commitment to work with one faculty member, in SMS, it's a little more open. So if there are no faculty members in SMS that you want to work with, that would be another signal that we're not a good fit for you. And please do mention in your application, both in the little box that says who you want to work with, and then in the essay itself, who you want to work with and why. And you don't need to do that, like, you don't need to gas us, right? Like, blah, blah, blah is blah, 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 right? We know we're so great. We want to hear why you're great, right? We want to hear the questions that you will ask. So, but it is very important that we know not just that you're a fit for us, but that we're a fit for you, that there's a reason that you want to be in SMS. And you would actually be surprised by how many students apply without articulating in their essay why specifically they want to be in socio-medical sciences, not just why they want to come to Columbia or why they want to come to Mailman, but why they want to come to SMS. Because imagine for more recent, we have 1 to 3 slots a year. We want to give it to somebody, who's going to take it, but also who can't imagine anywhere else that would be a better place for them to study. So I think with that, I'll open it up to questions. As I said, if you feel like your question is awkward, feel free to turn off your camera and change your name. And maybe just drop them in the chat. I think that that's faster than speaking them. But if you must speak, I guess unmute and speak. Okay, questions are coming in thick and fast. Let me just remember how to see them. What specific is training is provided in the behavioral sciences? So, because we're not taking psychology applications right now, and so anthropology and sociology are both social sciences, there is not actually very specific training provided in behavioral sciences. However, we have a lot of psychologists in the department. So you could work closely with a psychologist. There probably is some, I don't think we teach health psychology anymore. So I would say actually, like, if that's your driving interest, we're probably not the best place for you, because most schools of public health in their departments of social and behavioral science have like 9 behavioral scientists and 1 social scientist. And so we're the department that is the other way around. GRE is required for sociology and anthropology. It is not required for history. We do that because we're following the lead of our partner departments downtown. There is a 3 manuscript option for the dissertation. I think also our whole, I'm not sure that you really want to read this between now and December, but our whole doctoral handbook is available online. And so any like incredibly arcane question you might have, is answered there. I think that you are allowed to apply to the discipline and the SMS program in the same cycle. I will say that students who are interested in medical anthropology or medical sociology, sometimes our colleagues downtown will let us know, like, this student would be a better fit for you than for us, because for better or for worse, we are sort of the center of gravity in both of those things at Columbia. So if your driving interest is med-soc or med-anthro, we might be a better fit. That said, the arts and sciences guarantees 7 years of funding. And nobody, I mean, I assume none of you are running a charity. So there's no reason not to apply to both, other than the fact that it's expensive. An average of it's actually 1 to 3 students total per year. And there have been years when we've only had 1 student matriculate. Thankfully, it hasn't been for a bit, but it's been a while since we've had 3 students. So it's hovered around 2, which breaks my heart, but here we are. Question about work and educational experience. So there's a question on the application about your leadership experience in public health. And that is not a question to which we, the review committee, gives a lot of weight, because we're really interested in your potential as a scholar. And so the work that you've done in the world might have led you to think about different questions or new questions, but I don't think that we weight work experience heavily. What we do weight very heavily is research experience. And some students gain research experience as an undergraduate, and other students gain, or applicants gain, research experience in their jobs by working on someone's research team. We frequently, students who are to whom we make an offer have some experience publishing. So that's something that we value because, past performance is not a guarantee of future success, but it's a good indicator of potential. And so that's something that is good evidence that somebody has the mind of a scholar. What is the best website to learn more about the faculty? Thank you, Armani, for we don't control. There's a question about why does the SOFIS application ask if you've been in touch with a faculty member, if that's not something we wait. And we actually have very little control over what's in the SOFIS application. It's a standard application across programs. I would imagine that there are programs where if they use a mentor model, they want to know that you've been in touch with the faculty who you say you're going to work with or you would like to work with. But there are two questions about faculty. One is, who have you been in touch with? And it's fine to say nobody for that, because I just told you, even if you email us, we're unlikely to respond. But it is very important that you list the faculty that you would like to work with. And given how few slots we have, we're really not interested in training students who want to work with a faculty member in EPI or PopFam. And so it really is important that those be faculty who are in SMS. The program is not a good fit for working professionals because it's a full-time program. That's what a requirement of the NIH training grants, and that's the way that our program is structured, is that it's very both intense and intensive. And so we require that students be enrolled full-time. Through what major field of study? So social medical sciences is not a major field of study. Students apply through anthropology or sociology, depending on what concentration they're applying to. We haven't, in recent memory, had a student either come in with or successfully get NSF funding as a history student. So I say anthropology or sociology because those are the disciplinary choices that our students have had. I'm not entirely sure that I get the question about a health degree. I think that if there is coursework in that health degree that is the same as public health courses that students would have done. I'm going to let Andrea answer this because I'm just going to get it.
So those applicants coming in with an advanced degree, and that could be an MS, an MPH, an MA, an MLET, any advanced degree, it could be a law degree. We apply transfer credit. We take a look at the courses taken. So if you've taken EPI and biostatistics, tick, those are done. So we'll apply those. If there's more concentration in the sociology disciplinary focus, then we apply those. We can apply up to 30 credits, transfer credits, and it might be as few as 12 credits. And still, whether it's 12 credits or 30 credits, that applicant, admitted student with an advanced degree, is still likely and expected to complete their coursework within 2 years. It's not impossible. I mean, they did 12 credits and 12 over 4 semesters. That's 48 credits if we only transferred in 12. So that's how that works. So it could be any advanced degree, and we'll take a look at what we can transfer in, and that's what we'll do.
So there's a question about disciplinary background versus a public health background. We're not currently reviewing applications for the DRPH program, which is really a bummer because we have faculty who have DRPHs and we have some more advanced students who have with DRPHs. So there are a few students who have a public health background, and I can certainly think of students. In fact, I would say the student who wrote the best dissertation I ever read came in with an MPH and had worked in a needle exchange program before coming to Columbia. And so I think, you you can have a great mind and a ton of potential as a scholar and have a public health background. So I wouldn't count yourself out. I think what's key is to be able to situate yourself in relation to anthropology or sociology or history in your application. So you don't already need to be one of those things, but you need to articulate a clear aspiration and a clear explanation that you have like some grasp even of what those things are. But I think we've certainly.
I will add that for the with regard to the social science concentration, that applicants should have, if not a college major, some foundational coursework. It would be very unusual to accept a student who has no sociology background and they're applying to the sociology concentration and or maybe they took one course. It's just, so you don't have to have a major, a sociology major, but there should be not only making the connection while you are applying to that particular concentration, but there should be some foundational courses there.
Yeah, and that's really just because the pool is very competitive. And so when we're looking at a person who's never taken a sociology class and somebody who has taken a lot of sociology classes and thinking about how they're going to do in a graduate seminar in sociology, it makes more sense to choose the person who's already done that and demonstrated not just an interest in, but some experience with. What we are seeking to understand through recommendation letters, that is a great question. We are seeking to understand your potential to ask and answer interesting and important questions. And so every year there are recommendations that we get from people's work supervisors who are like, so-and-so was a great team member, and like all the other things that people say about people at work that are good, like, positive outlook, always on time, et cetera, et cetera. And, soft skills matter, right? And I would say, so that's not, I wouldn't count those out, but the recommendations that are compelling, not going to lie, so-and-so was the best student I've ever taught, or so-and-so was among the 5 to 10 best students I've ever taught. So-and-so asked extraordinary questions in the classroom. So-and-so demonstrated a capacity beyond the typical undergraduate to do original research, or so-and-so was on my research team and went beyond, being a research assistant and doing data collection and made fundamental contributions to this manuscript. So we're looking for recommendations that can speak to your potential to do independent research. And doesn't mean that, you've been on some, doesn't have to be being on someone's NIH project. I think some of the most compelling recommendations come from people who have taught you as an undergraduate and really seen you shine. How deeply should we engage with theory in our application essays? Deeply enough so that if you're talking about the sociology of gender and sexuality, you do more than say, I am interested in the sociology of gender and sexuality. And not so deeply that you go into like the difference between this and that work of Foucault, right? Or even necessarily like mention Foucault. But I think you need to, if you want to talk about how your work might advance anthropology, obviously that would go beyond saying that you want to do qualitative research, or even that you're interested in using ethnography to explore a question, and talking about how your work would speak to some question in medical anthropology. I mean, we're not like, I think back to my graduate essay and I'm like, I would never get into graduate school now, truly. But because I think I wrote my application, I was like, I'm interested in culture and public health. Like, it was very much not what I'm asking you to do. And I realize it's sort of like an arms race in the world. So I would say do your best, right? Like don't overdo it, don't fake it. But give your honest best shot at articulating what you think is a question that would be interesting to sociologists, or anthropologists or historians. GRE is required for anthropology and sociology applicants and not for history applicants. I don't think it has anything to do with what other degrees people have.
I want to go back up to Ayana's question about the review from our colleagues in the social science departments. Not all, just to clarify, not all of the applications will be reviewed by them. So there's an initial review within SMS, and then those are shortlisted. And those that are shortlisted we route downtown to the Morningside campus, to the departments of sociology, history, and anthropology. And those ones are reviewed. They weigh in. It's not a deal breaker. It's not that what they say goes, but we do solicit their feedback and input on those applications. So not all of the applications are going to be routed downtown. Now, if you are interested in attending their information session, yes, I would encourage you to do that. It also provides a little bit more insight into what they're looking for in their applications, their programs, their faculty. Because the expectation is that as a student within SMS, you are going to also have a footing and a grounding in those respective departments. So it certainly wouldn't hurt. And you might also decide that, hey, yeah, I do want to apply to both Mailman Socio-Medical Sciences and Sociology, because you can drop 2 applications. It's costly, but you certainly could. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just to build on what Andrea was saying and to explain a little bit more how the application review works. So your applications are reviewed in SMS by members of the admissions committee, and then the short list for each discipline goes to that department, and each department has a different way of doing it. So in sociology, I think it's one person who reviews them, who is the person who's the SMS liaison in sociology. And in anthropology, it's a small committee. And in history, I think it varies from year to year. So we try to respect that department's process of looking at our applicants and putting them essentially in 3 buckets, like amazing, okay, but we wouldn't admit, and probably not. And the probably not doesn't mean not smart. It just means not somebody who's demonstrated that they can hold their own in a doctoral level classroom. So I think it would not necessarily be beneficial to contact faculty in those departments. It might be useful to you to go to the info session, and it certainly would be useful to spend some time looking at the faculty web pages. We had a student who matriculated last year, who in the sociology concentration, who was interested in working with me and with someone in the sociology department. And so when she was shortlisted, I reached out to that faculty member in sociology and I said, hey, this student is interested in working with you. Would you be interested in working with them? If all the people that you want to work with are in sociology or anthropology or history, you should definitely apply to those departments and not to SMS. But it's not bad to mention a person or two in those departments, because as Andrea said, we do expect our students to get mentorship from people from our colleagues in those departments. Is there a preferential format for resumes for SMS? I think, not longer than a couple pages, unless you're really have done, I don't think I've ever seen an applicant, with the exception of one who had 29 publications, whose work justified a resume longer than 3 pages. And the people have done really interesting things, but I think boil it down. And yes, if you've done all of your research experience should be featured prominently, because that is one of the things that we're most interested in. Questions, concerns, complaints? I guess one thing, this is being recorded, but what the heck? I think I said this last year. As director of the doctoral program, I spend a lot of time trying to convince people not to get doctorates. And so I just want to take a beat and like give you my spiel. Frequently people apply for a doctorate because they think they're going to do research that's going to make the world a better place. I am here to tell you that the thing that is keeping the world from being a better place is not a lack of knowledge, right? Like, how long have we known about global warming? How long do we know about, like, we still have not advanced needle exchange in America, despite decades of evidence that it's useful. Like, there's so many, the barrier to policy change is not knowledge, it's power. So if you really are, if like that is the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, making the world a better place, there are a lot of other things that you could do that would be more impactful. And I say this, like, I've been very fortunate, and I think that my work has driven policy change, but most research that people do doesn't. And doctoral programs don't tend to give great training in how to drive policy change with knowledge. So that's a thing to think about. Another thing to think about is that it's hard for me to think of any other professional path where you could work so hard for so long and not be able to find a job in the city you want to live in. And that is a terrible constraint, because it means people end up living in different cities than their family, like than their significant other and children, or taking a job that is not a job they want to take, or not finding an academic job at all because the academic job market is terrible. So I would just take a minute to think about whether this is really the only path that you can imagine for yourself. And it's worked out great for me, right? So you might think that I'm like the biggest hypocrite you've ever seen, but I just want you to go into it with your eyes open in terms of the difficulty of placing. And I mean, our students do great in general with placement, but the academic job market nightmare is real. So you will be very unlikely to get a job at a school as fancy as Columbia. And it will be hard to get a job if you limit your search to only the place you want to live. I mean, that said, I've had students for whom it's worked out great. But I think that student who wrote the best dissertation I've ever read couldn't get a job as an anthropologist. And she went from position to position, teaching 8 classes a year, and she finally gave up, and she's at the CDC. And you know what? Her life is great. So like, it worked out fine. She's doing important work. She's using her skills, but her dream of being an anthropologist, and I think that she would have been, an extraordinary independent scholar. The cost of working at the CDC is that she doesn't get to choose what she works on. She has to work on whatever the CDC is doing. Is that shatteringly terrible? No, but I want you to think about it before you pursue this path so that you can have good lives and not just enjoy your work. Another thing that I will say that I think is special about SMS, at least in my tenure as director of the doctoral program, is that I try really hard to support people living their lives. Like, this is not a dress rehearsal. If you have a parent who's dying, or you have a child, or you have some other life crisis, like, those things are real and consequential. And if you have a parent who's dying, maybe that's definitely more important than working on your dissertation. So our students, I don't know if they have a higher fertility rate than students in other programs, but they don't feel like they need to hide it, which really, I think, means a lot to them and means a lot to me. If your research interests don't fall cleanly into any of the, I think if you can genuinely imagine questions that might fit into one of the categories, it's worth applying, because you don't know who else is going to be in the pool. If you have clear evidence of being a potentially brilliant scholar despite not having done a ton of work on gender, if you can articulate a question that is about that, I think it's worth a shot. There might be somebody who has already done a lot of work that would be a more convincing candidate. But I think if you feel like this is really the place that you want to be and you can afford this additional application, I think it's worth trying to trying to make that connection if you feel like you can make it without just like out and out lying about what you're interested in. Never a fan of lying. Okay, we have at least one person who's reconsidered. So I feel like I've mission accomplished here. And when you do change the world, you can thank me.
So working outside of the US, yes, Jennifer, we've got tons of students who are doing global work.
Tons. Yeah. I mean, I think so. Yes. Even American students are interested in things outside of the United States. So yeah, we have lots of students who do global work. And all of our anthropology concentration students, certainly, and many of our sociology concentration students, Siri Su, who's on the faculty at Brandeis, wrote the most extraordinary book about the unintended adverse consequences of maternal mortality prevention interventions funded by the Global North. I can't recall right now the title of Siri's book, but her last name is S-U-H, and she's one of the many, many students we've had who's done global work. If students come in with their own funding, I think if you have your own funding that is substantially equivalent to what we would offer in a package. Yes, the book is called Dying to Count. Thank you. If you've secured funding that is substantially equivalent to what we would offer in a package, it's certainly worth applying if you don't fit into one of the NIH categories. Like if, for example, you have a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, or if you're applying to the NSF GRFP program now, you won't find out until the spring. But if you're applying for the NSF GRFP, you should, and you feel like SMS is a good place for you, even though you're not in one of the training grant categories, you should definitely apply, because a person who can write a competitive application for that particular mechanism at the National Science Foundation is typically a student who would do very well in our program. There are lots of complicated things because that's 3 years of funding and we commit to 5 years of funding. And so if you have your own funding, it doesn't make you a shoo-in. And obviously we wouldn't take somebody who's not up to what we're looking for intellectually. But, given how constrained our funding is, yes, if you have your own funding, that is compelling. And students apply. The Soros is like 1 in a million, but students apply to the Point Foundation. There are a few other mechanisms that provide that level of funding for doctoral training. Yes, you should. If you have, you should definitely. If you have funding, you should list it both on your resume, and there's actually a place on the application that lists both funding that you've secured and funding that's in process, like funding that you've applied for. So just make sure we don't miss it if you've done that. What other paths? I'm a big fan of community organizing, right? I've done community organizing training in as my side hustle. And so I think getting a master's in social work and learning how to build power to advance legislative change, that's, if I were 25 years younger and trying to figure out an impact-oriented path, that's what I would do. Or honestly, I would run for office because there are not enough really great people who are elected to office. So we need better people in the government to have better policies. You should not reach out to potential mentors in advance of applying because they won't have time to answer your questions. I think that fit with the program, you should never, in any circumstances, email a faculty member and ask them to tell you about their research. Because if there's one thing that faculty have made evident, it is what their research is on. You literally can go to the library and find their research, or at least people increasingly publish open. I don't want to assume library access, but people increasingly publish open access. So you can find enough of what they work on to get a sense of their disciplinary and, substantive and theoretical interests. So I think you can find out about faculty in other ways, enough to see if they would be a good match topically. And one of the reasons that we don't require that students stick with the mentor that they've named in the application is because there are other reasons that people end up not being a good fit. Somebody can be a very good fit topically and then not have a work style that meshes with your work style. And so we don't want students to feel stuck in that. The program is in person and it's full-time. And so I'm sorry, but it's not a program that's designed to, there are a lot of great programs, but this is not a program that's designed to fit with people who are working full-time. No question is too small while you have me here. I think another way that you can get a good sense of the program is by looking at the work that our current students are doing, which, I don't know, it will give you a sense of what kinds of questions our students work on. I sometimes joke that they're just two SMS dissertations. There's the SMS dissertation that is about the unintended consequences of public health policies and programs. And there is the dissertation that's about why people don't do what we wish they would do. But that's a very, very broad brush. We don't have an organized postdoctoral training program in SMS. Faculty sometimes have slots for postdoctoral fellows on their grants. Students, I didn't talk at all about the rotations. That's a good question. So when students come in, they are assigned to one faculty member for the whole first year, and they do research on that faculty member's team. And it's not a unilateral assignment. We take into account which faculty members you're interested in working on. And also it depends on who has their research in a place that they can absorb and use a doctoral student that year in ways that will be useful for the doctoral student. You will not be copying or going to the library, or at least you might go to the library, but it's only if the book can't be delivered. And then after that first year rotation, students do rotations for 5 years as part of their training that are a mix of teaching rotations, where again, it's not just like crowd control, it's actually like learning, mentored teaching experience, research rotations, and in some cases, fellowship writing. If students are applying for a fellowship that is substantially equivalent to the funding that SMS provides, that can count towards a rotation. And those rotations are year-round. And in the summer, they're not so much time that students don't have time to also explore their own interests. Appropriate writing samples. The best writing sample is a single authored peer-reviewed paper, but most students don't have that. So the next best writing sample is anything that you wrote that shows how you think. It could be, so like, I would say usually not a research, a paper that you wrote in class, in college, not an opinion piece, of a paper that you wrote. Can I speak to why the DRPH has not taken applications in the past 2 years? I really can't. It has to do with complicated internal things that are not at all a reflection of the excellence of our current DRPH students. And we're very much hoping that those things can be resolved and we can take DRPH students in the future. And in the meantime, there's Hopkins, there's UNC Chapel Hill, there's a lot of good programs. So I wish that we were reviewing DRPH students, but we're not. How much funding is granted? Such a good question. What is the current stipend, Andrea? Wait, you're muted.
I'm looking that up now. I'll get back to you.
Okay.
I think it's 47.
Yeah. Please don't send more than a 10-page writing sample. I'm sure that anybody who did a master's thesis that was very, very good. And what you can do is you can give us an outline of the whole master's thesis and then explain how the piece that you're sharing fits in with that. And if I were going to choose a piece of a master's thesis, I would say the piece that explains why the research is important and what's new that it shows. So not like the method section important in general, but not so much a criteria by which we would review you. And just like be cognizant of the fact that we're reviewing several hundred applications, all of which, like if everybody included a 100-page master's thesis, that would be a lot. So 46,680 plus health insurance.
Health insurance, tuitions, that's the stipend amount for a 12-month stipend. And that also includes the tuition benefits, the medical insurance, and the university health service fees. So all fees and medical insurance are covered also.
And so the cost of training a student is actually much greater than that, because I don't know what the tuition is, but it's like $65,000, $70,000, $80,000. It's a lot of money. And NIH, I think, pays $16,000. And so the department makes up the difference between what NIH pays and what is provided. So our students don't pay tuition. We pay their tuition for 5 years. If they end up taking longer than 5 years, at that point, they qualify for a different kind of tuition, and so it's much lower than that. Although not nothing. It's like $8,000 a year, something like that. I don't know. You can look it up. Don't quote me on that. It's something that is much less than $60,000 or $70,000 a year. In terms of applicants' research experience on the resume, we're looking to get a sense of what kinds of research tasks applicants did, and we're particularly interested in the extent, like there are a lot of very important elements of being on a research team that don't necessarily give you the opportunity to demonstrate your own potential as a researcher. And, you know, you're not the principal investigator, you're a member of the research team. So I think just describing in succinct language what you did on the research team, and then in your essay you could talk about the connection between what you did and the kinds of questions you want to ask. Or you could not make that connection if in fact the research experience was just experience you had, but that's not what drives you to our program. More questions? This is like, I don't know if maybe I'm aging myself by saying this reminds me of Jiffy Pop, but you know, like when you make a Jiffy Pop and like at first the like popcorn is like pop, 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 and then eventually like the kernels peter out. And I feel like we've arrived at the kernel petering.
You gotta shake it up a little bit.
Right. So in case there's some more kernels in there, I'll give another minute or two. And then we'll call it a night. Andrea, do you have any words of wisdom? You've seen so many applications.
Let's see. I would just add, with regard to the training fellowships, there are specific questions within the application. So you tick the box if you are interested in applying for one or more of those. And you should also include something in your statement of purpose. So it's not enough to just tick the box. You should also speak to that and address that a little bit in your statement of purpose. And it doesn't have to be the whole focus of the statement, but you should mention what it is that you're interested in. So if you're applying for the gender sexuality training fellowship and you're interested in gender sexuality and anthropology and what about it? So, so that you need to connect those dots, and just again, what Professor Hirsch was saying is, tell us, it needs to come clear on what it is that you want to do in terms of advancing the literature, the science, the scholarship in that. So it's not enough, like I said, just don't tick a box and say, oh yes, I'm interested in this. What about it? What about it specifically? Are you interested? What are you interested in advancing?
So if you have questions, Andrea, I'm not sure I'll ever get over this, but she's taken a new position, so she's not going to be with SMS. So if you have questions, you can email Charmaine Jones, who is holding us together in the meantime, or you can email me. If your recommenders are a little late with their letters, all is not lost. We distribute the applications to faculty around the middle of December. So it has happened that pieces of the application come in after December 1st, but I think that there probably are pieces of the application that may not be late. And so I think sometimes the letters are late, sometimes the GREs are late, sometimes the the coursework verification is late, but I think the other parts can't be late. Isn't that correct?
Well, the stuff that you can do, you need to submit that by the 1st. So that's your application, your statement, your resume. So your part, you do yours by December 1st. Supplemental materials can trickle in shortly after. So yes, there's a couple questions. So one, if you're working full-time, this is just, it's not the program, and it's not, there's no virtual, there's no distance learning. So I just honestly, just to be frank, you need to find something else that's going to fit your work and wherever you're located. But Eric asked a good question there about what's an example of a bad application. And I think even just, part of what I just said, it's and even also what Professor Hirsch had mentioned, an application where they didn't really address why they're applying to sociomedical sciences. They're interested in applying to this prestigious Columbia University and the, esteemed faculty, and they're just saying all of these things and telling us things that we already know that are on our website, and they're just regurgitating. That's not helpful. And it doesn't tell us anything about what you're interested in doing. So again, please do not submit a 3, 4, 5 page statement of purpose with that winding tale about how you started here and then you went to this and now you're interested in this, and this is what's brought you to. Again, your CV, your resume, your transcripts are all going to tell us what you've been doing. We really want to know about what it is that you want to do next. Those are just a couple of examples.
And don't feel in the statement of purpose that you need to mention every question that you ever might think about exploring. It's much better to take 1 or 2 questions and go deeper and explain why that's why that's a question that catches your interest, not for personal reasons, but for intellectual reasons, and how you think you might advance knowledge in that area. So I think trying to cram too much personal sort of resume type detail into the essay, not explaining why you want to study in SMS in relation to the kind of research that you want to do, forgetting to mention any SMS faculty at all.
Or if you mention faculty that are all in the Department of Health Policy and Management, that's just like, well, can't help you there. Yeah. And the other thing too is just, it's minor, but it's big, it's spell check. And just make sure that you swap out those universities. So if you're applying to SMS, that your statement of purpose says SMS and it doesn't say Harvard, Hopkins, or someplace else. And we are Columbia in New York City, not Columbia in South America. So yes.
Right. And I mean, we're all interested in pubic health, but don't proofread. In terms of, okay, last question. How would I describe the qualities of the most distinguished PhD student I've seen? I've seen many really wonderful PhD students. And I think that what I would say is wonderful about those students is their capacity to ask a question that is really fresh, that is important, that is not just describing something that we didn't know about, but that has some broader impact on the field. The dissertation about pediatric heart surgery in Honduras was extraordinarily courageous field work and beautiful writing, but it was also a rumination on the consequences of global engagement. And so it was about something that was more than just the topic itself. It spoke to like really profound questions that we wrestle with in medical anthropology. So I think that the students who do work that is so distinguished, it's because they have a capacity not just to answer a question, but to answer a question in a way that is important for people who don't care about the answer to that specific question. If you can identify gaps in the research that you hope to speak to, that's great. But we realize like we will train you to do a lit review. And so you may not be in a position to do that now. So I think talk about the question that you're excited about. Get us excited about that question. Show why you think it's an important question. If you're one of the ones to join us, we will give you new ways to think about gaps in the literature. But in the meantime, just give it your best shot in terms of what you can do, and what your research will show. And with that, I just want to thank you all for showing up, for asking such good questions, for demonstrating interest in SMS. And we look forward to seeing your applications or to seeing you change the world, or both. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.